if you really want to take your income to the next level, be it levels that you previously dreamed of, sales is the way to do it.
I believed in the lie that I had to do this, and this. And what I found was it had nothing to do with the hours I was working. It had everything to do with the skill sets and how my brand appeared to my market. They're controlling the narrative of what you just said. You want to learn how to frame that narrative so they think what you want them to think about you.
In your keynotes, you said most people fail for the simple reason that they don't have the right skills to succeed.
And as a salesperson, you want to understand what neurons are firing that causes a prospect to say no compared to saying yes. What causes them to go into fight or flight mode and say, not interested.
So let's look at kind of a framework here. That's how you were able to crush it in sales for 17 years.
There's really 5 core tonalities that you have to really master if you want to be like a top 1% salesperson or even higher, okay? The first one is...
So when you hear financial freedom, what comes to mind? Like, what is the idea that you think about? And here's the crazy thing. It's actually not as far-fetched as you think. You might just be thinking about it wrong. You don't have to go out and start a new business. You don't have to come up with this great idea. It comes from one skill. Like for me personally, I got rich with this one skill, and that is sales. There's a right way to do it, wrong way to do it. And today, I wanted to dive in with the expert on this. He is the #1 person for this type of conversation. And he's going to get into exactly what does this mean in 2024, 2025. I have with me Jeremy Miner, who is I guess I would say the expert in this category. Like he's known as the GOAT in terms of using psychology to actually sell. And he cut his teeth in the sales industry for almost 2 decades, making multiple 7 figures annually in net income, not from running the business, but just from selling. Net income, not just the top line. That's the bottom line. And now he runs 7th Level, which is the fastest growing sales training agency here in the US. Thank you so much for being here, man.
Hey, thanks. You know, at least my grandma says that we're really good, you know, but
yes.
Thanks for having me on. My sales career was a lot of fun, and you know, now I get the experience of starting my own business and doing the deal, you know?
Yeah. And I think of like so many people, I wanted to start with the goal of being financially free because I just hear about this all the time. But I think like if you really want to take your income to the next level and you know, be it levels that you previously dreamed of, sales is the way to do it.
Well, you have to learn how to communicate. Communication is your #1 skill set that you can acquire, and it affects you financially whether you like it or not. So even if you're not in sales, you know, we call this non-sales selling. You're out there trying to persuade, you're trying to influence, you're trying to move others to your way of thinking every single day. You don't even have to have a sales job or even get paid, right? If you're, let's say, I don't know, an attorney trying to convince the jury that your client's innocent, what are you doing? Trying to persuade, influence, move others. If you're a mom trying to get your kids to do their homework, you know, you're trying to persuade, you're trying to influence. If you're an employee trying to convince your boss to give you a pay raise, you're trying to persuade, influence, move others. I mean, everything that you do in life has to do with your communication skills. So if it's something that you really don't learn how to do, you're just at a disadvantage over other people who do that. You might even be far more talented and smarter at something, but you don't know how to communicate that message. And that causes you a lot of financial losses for sure.
Yeah, so that's the huge part. I think if people realized it is a part of their life, even if they think of sales as a negative thing, you're selling whether you like it or not. You know, you're in it.
It's just how you sell.
Yes.
Right. See, that's the stigma in society. That's how, you know, how are salespeople viewed in society at large? They're viewed at a lower status. Now, why is that? Right? It's the way they've been taught how to communicate. Right? The old high pressure, you know, push them into it type of sales that works against human behavior that even salespeople don't even like used on them. So if you don't like being pushed and pressured by salespeople and you're a salesperson, imagine how your prospects are dealing with that. That doesn't mean that you're like all timid and be like, well, you know, if you're interested, get back to me. There's a medium balance in there where you want to get the prospect to view you as the expert, the trusted authority. You're still assertive, but you're doing it in a way that gets them to like trust you enough to emotionally open up and tell you what's really going on, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot to that, but you know, we want to raise our status as salespeople. We have to change the way we're actually communicating.
That makes sense. And so this is the thing I think people realize, or this is the idea that they think. They think either I'm good at it or I'm not. And I think you even quoted this at one of your keynotes. You said most people fail for the simple reason that they don't have the right skills to succeed.
Yeah,
I think
it
that's
was
Tony
something
Robbins.
I heard from Tony Robbins in a random CD when I was like 21-year-old kid. I mean, this is, you know, you're talking like, what was this, 23, 24 years ago when people used to listen to the round things, magical round things called CDs, right? Yeah. But it's true, and I could have been butchering a statement, but you will fail if you don't learn the right skills necessary to succeed. And when I heard that, it was like a moment. I'd just been in sales for maybe 2 months. I was a 21-year-old kid in college, knocking doors, selling, home security systems during the summer. And I started to realize, that when I heard that from Tony, and he went on to expand that everybody's taught skills, but there was a difference in the skills you could learn, that there were some skills that were far more advanced than others. And I'm like, oh, I thought salespeople just said the same thing and got the different results. And why a salesperson was successful over somebody else is they were just born with better charisma.
That's or you see like the gift of gab or something.
Yeah, the gift of gab, right? Yeah. And I always ask this when I'm speaking to an audience or something. I'm like, raise your hand if you were born with advanced questioning skills. And everybody's like, no. And I'm like, yeah, raise your hand if you were born with advanced tonality skills. Nobody raises their hand. They're like, no. Raise your hand if you were born with advanced objection handling and prevention skills. I see. So none of us are born with those skills. Those are skills we have to what? We have to acquire. We have to learn those skills. So when you hear, oh, that person's a natural born closer, well, what evidence shows that? What scientific, was that in your DNA? That's a negative A-type blood type. They're a natural born closer. Like that's just a myth. Yeah. Sales is something you acquire. It's a skill set you have to learn if you want to be good, if you want to help a lot of people. That's what selling is.
Yeah, and I think there's so many opportunities in today's economy to sell anything. Yeah. From low ticket to high ticket and all the areas in between. But once you have that skill, eventually when you do start your own business or you might do bigger things in the future, having that is the foundation for success.
I mean, it's everything. Like if you're going to interview for a job, you have to learn how to communicate and frame your message the way you want the interview to view you. And so many people go in there and they just, they'll ask them a question and they'll just blurt out an answer and they hope it sticks. But they literally are causing that interviewer to frame what you just said according to their interpretation. Yeah. You don't want that. Like they're controlling the narrative of what you just said. You want to learn how to frame that narrative so they think what you want them to think about you. That's a whole different ball game at that point.
So quick question for you. Are you going to make the same amount of income this year as you made last year? If so, cool. But if you're not okay with that, I want to personally invite you to the #1 event for people who want to grow their business with modern marketing. It's the 5th annual Forward event happening live in Las Vegas this July. The one thing that separates Forward from every other event is the energy in this room. This year, I'm bringing in top speakers from all around the country. People like Dan Martell, who has the fastest growing personal brand in business right now. Chris Doe, who's the #1 teacher on this topic, and a host of other experts. So if you are serious about growing your business in 2025, I would love to see you there. We are down to the last group of tickets. This event sells out every year, and this year it's happening faster than ever before. So there's a special offer. You can click the link in the description or scan this QR code, and I will see you in Las Vegas. I think of like people, it's more about persuasion and kind of setting the table for what you're about to do and then leading the conversation to that outcome. But I think right now I hear a lot of sales advice from the guys who teach closing. And like the best closers and use this close, it works 90% of the time, and use this script
90% of the time. Yeah. Well, I'd love to see the data on that.
Yeah, but you just hear all this stuff on social, right? There's just an information overload of like sales advice. But I feel like that the puck has moved. Like I feel like the game has changed. I know you talk a lot about this, like
we're changing still.
Yeah, so we're selling in a way that was 10, 20, 30 years old to people who actually put up their guard when they hear that kind of stuff. Yeah, and that gives this negative connotation that you talked about earlier.
You want to learn techniques that work with the brain. And what I mean by that work with human behavior. Most sales training, and the sales training I went through in my earlier years, not granted, I went to school for behavioral science and social dynamics and human psychology, so I kind of had an advantage of, hey, I was understanding how the brain makes decisions. And as a salesperson, you want to understand what neurons are firing that causes a prospect to say no compared to saying yes. What causes them to go into fight or flight mode and say, not interested, when you cold call within 8 seconds. They didn't really hear what you were doing. What triggers that reaction? Did they wake up that morning? Let's say you're in real estate and mortgages. Let's say that you're a real estate agent and you're cold calling some expired listings. Did that prospect, wake up in the morning, you know what, at 3:45 today, after I've had kind of a stressful day at work, I think when that real estate agent calls me about my home that I took off, listings about 9 months ago. I think I'm going to go into fight or flight mode about 9 seconds in and say, oh, no, we're not interested in selling the house. Is that something they planned out, or is that a triggered reaction based on the salesperson's tone and what they said when the prospect actually answered and said hello? And once you learn how to eliminate trigger words that every salesperson uses, right? That prospects are used to that script, and you learn how to shift your tone based on the context in the conversation, suddenly becomes a lot of fun. You could help a lot of people.
Yeah.
And you get paid a lot for it.
So let's look at kind of a framework here. Yeah. I know you talked about the NEPQ methodology that changed the game for you. Yeah. And that's how you were able to really just crush it in sales for 17 years. But I feel like everybody says the same thing, and they start this conversations the same way. And then that
Give
puts
me an example.
So let's look at the real estate example.
Yeah.
They will just call somebody and they'll be reading from a script.
Yeah.
Hey, Mr. Miner, this is Neil with XYZ Real Estate. Yeah. And I saw that you're listing, and I think just in that beginning section of it's a cold call. Yeah. My guard goes up. Even without, I don't know what the trigger word is there, but
most of it's their tone. Just so you know. So
without
most
even
of it's
not a certain word, it's just how you're
the tonality,
actually
because so that's how so there's really 3 parts of the brain. Okay. And I won't give everybody the scientific terms for it. I'll kind of give you some basic stuff. So you have a lot of people would know it as it's your survival part of your brain. A lot of people call it the reptilian part of your brain, right? That's your fight or flight mode. Okay. Then you have the midbrain, and then you have what's called the neocortex, which is your, it makes a decision for you. Okay. So your survival part of your brain, let's say that you're walking into a grocery store and you're crossing a street where there could be some cars driving. And all of a sudden you hear this lady scream, terrified scream, right? What's your first reaction? You're going to go like this. So that part of your brain was triggered by her tone. Okay. Yeah. That scream, that tone caused your brain. So it's the way God wired us whenever he put the first humans here on the earth. I don't know when that was, maybe millions, billions, thousands of years. That's all debatable. But that triggers your survival part of your brain to am I safe? That's like fight or flight. Okay. Yeah. You didn't really hear her words. You just heard the tone. Okay. Yeah. And what happens a split second later is the words go up to what's called your midbrain. The midbrain starts to interpret what those words mean. Okay. And then it goes right into your neocortex, and your neocortex says, oh, I'm okay. She's just yelling at her son to be safe crossing the street. Yeah. I'm good. See, but you reacted based off the tone. So if I can shift my tone, and there's certain context, especially when cold calling, where it's almost like you have to have a familiar tone where they feel oh, I kind of should know this person, because that keeps their brain curious, oh, how do I know this person? Rather than try to get rid of them. Yeah, is John there? Yeah, John, hey, it's James, James Miller with XIZ. See the familiar tone.
Yeah. So you're wondering, do I know this person?
Yeah. So what your brain is going to do is who's James Miller? Who's James? It sounds like I know James, but did I meet them at a networking event? I should know them. So you wouldn't dare be who is this? Or not interested. You'll just go with it, because your brain is processing, this person seems to know who I am, they're familiar, because I used a familiar tone. But if I'm yeah, is this James Miller? James Miller, it's Jeremy Miner with XYZ Company. I'm a real estate agent here with XYZ Company, and the reason why I'm calling you is your brain is oh, salesperson. Yeah. Because it sounds like a telemarketer, right? So I literally almost could say the same words, but my tone is from a familiar tone to that monotone tone, and I'm going to get a completely different result from the prospect. Yeah, just basic stuff like that.
And that just sets you off to fail from the beginning. So you're set up to fail. So I think you talk a lot about this, and I think this would be huge, is starting off the conversation, whether it's in person or on the phone, with a pattern interrupt.
Yeah, it depends on the context, right?
So this is for a cold call.
Yeah, so a cold call, that is definitely a pattern interrupt, because they're not used to that script. You got to realize, most of the prospects you're calling in every industry, it's not like you're the first one that's ever cold called them, right? So most cold callers literally use some form of, hi, my name is, introduce yourself, then tell them what company you're from, because it builds credibility, or so you've been taught, and then tell them the reason why you're calling. Well, your prospects already know that script. So their brain automatically goes, oh, salesperson, that's what it's triggered. Salesperson trying to sell me something, guard goes up, because it sounds like everybody else. And the tone especially triggers that because it sounds like a telemarketer. So when I eliminate that type of verbiage and when I eliminate trigger words, and when I eliminate words like, hey, John, I'm just following up, or I'm just checking in, or I'm just circling back. How many emails do you get that start like that?
Just circling back.
How many of those do you read the whole thing?
Not very many.
No, because that's just circling back or just following up or just checking in is a trigger word that your brain is used to that script from all other salespeople that have tried to follow up with you.
Yeah, and this is for email copy as well.
That doesn't mean you don't follow up. Just don't use the words follow up. Because literally you might as well say.
So what should people do instead of
You might as well say
saying,
like, hey, I'm just calling you to get you to buy from me again because you didn't buy from me last time. That's what their brain hears when I use that trigger word.
So if I'm, okay, let's use this as an example. I've, sent information out to a prospect. Mm-hmm. I'm following up.
Yeah. So let's say you've already talked to them. Because a follow-up call is usually you've already talked to them. They didn't buy for whatever reason.
Correct.
Or, whatever reason that is. So if I'm let's say if it's a real estate agent, because that kind of, you're in that space. That's a second largest industry you're trained. So I know a lot about it. Is this John? Yeah, John. Hey, it's Jeremy. Jeremy Miner. We talked. Gosh, I want to say it was like 4 or 5 months ago. You were looking at that house on, I think it was like the 55 Savannah Lane Roadhouse there in Savannah. And I tried to reach you a few times after we actually saw it, but I didn't hear back from you. Did you guys give up on getting more bedrooms for your kids, or what actually happened?
Yeah.
See, I'm framing that. I'm framing it at the end as the end result. Did you give up on blank, or what actually happened, right? You also if you've ever read like Chris Voss's book, negotiating book. I'm pretty good friends with Chris now. I've spoken on a few stages with him. He kind of does a frame similar to that. But it's just a pattern interrupt. So it's the same thing. Start with the familiar tone. Yeah, it's James Miller. We talk, and then I'm going to go into like this confused tone. Okay. Now, when I say confused tone, I don't mean like you're confused, like you're 97 and you have dementia.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what's going on. I mean, you're confused. Like, yeah, we talked. Gosh, I want to say, I'm confused like about the time we talked. So all that's doing is it's interrupting their pattern, and it causes them to be a little bit confused, but like, they stay engaged, if that makes sense. They don't feel like it's a sales call. And typically when you do that, it's really good to actually, and it's going to sound crazy, to shuffle papers while you're on the phone.
Yeah.
Do you know why? Because they hear that sound and it's interrupting a pattern. We talked about, I think it was the house on, I've got the papers here, Savannah Lane. You guys were looking for like a 4-bedroom house because you only had a 2. Did you guys give up on getting the house with more bedrooms, or what actually happened?
Yeah.
So let's say if they ghosted you or something. So that's just an example of like, I'm interrupting
even
that
the
pattern.
way you asked the question, it would make, I'm just putting myself in the prospect shoe. It kind of makes me want to explain what happened.
Yeah.
Or like,
it's hard to give up on what you said you wanted.
Yes.
Now, you don't say, did you give up on what you said you wanted?
Yeah.
See, that's defensive. And especially that tone is kind of like, you're there. No, I didn't give up. We just decided to go with somebody else or whatever,
So, okay. So this is really good. It's the tone in which you're asking the questions.
Can I explain why?
Yes.
Your tone, everybody write this down. This is really important if you're watching or listening to this. Your tone is how the prospect interprets your intention behind everything you say and ask. That's how they interpret why you're asking the question.
Got it. Okay.
That makes sense? Is he asking me the question, he or she asking me the question to try to manipulate me to sell me something? Or is he asking me the question, maybe I used a concerned tone because he's generally concerned about the consequences if I don't change this?
Yeah, that's huge. And I always come back to this. It's like the people that were calling, they had a problem.
Yeah.
They needed a property, or in this case with the expired listing, their home didn't sell.
Yeah.
Or if you're selling a program, whatever, like they reached out or were interested, they expressed interest in whatever solution you had. So they have this problem, you have the solution.
Yeah.
Where do we go wrong? It's like all of a sudden now you've created this like adversarial relationship.
Yeah.
But we have the thing that would help you.
And that's the thing. Like, that's what I always tell salespeople. I'm like, look, who has the problems? You're the prospect. They're like, well, the prospect.
Yeah.
I'm like, who has a solution to solve the problems? Well, I do. I was like, well, why? Then why are you qualifying to the prospect? Why wouldn't you learn techniques to get the prospect to qualify to you? Now, that doesn't mean you're like, you do some like frame where you're like, towards the end of the conversation, if I feel you're a good fit for us, I'll show you what to do next. Like, nobody, that's not what I mean by that. Like, that's a douchebag move that will get your prospects defensive. Their guard will be, they'll be like, yeah, okay, good. And then they're like, I'm not going to open up because I know they're going to try to close me at the end. Yeah. So it's getting them to qualify to you. Like, like when you're talking to them, like it could be the context or whatever, but I might get in the conversation like, yeah, towards the end of towards the end of the call, if you feel like, hey, this the same mortgages, if you feel like, hey, this might be what you're looking for, we can talk about possible next steps. Would that help you if I did that for you? Would that help you if I did that for you? Now, who am I getting to qualify to who? I'm getting them to qualify to me, because remember, I'm not the one that has the problems.
Yeah.
They do. I'm the one that solves those problems. If I'm mortgage, I'm getting them lending or whatever. I'm the one that solves the problem, them not being able to, get the funding for the house.
Yeah.
That type of
And it
thing.
also seems to change the way they treat you, because I've noticed a lot of salespeople tell me they talk bad about their customers.
Yeah.
It's because they're hung up on, they're treated poorly, they're dropped, meaning like the guy didn't show up for the appointment, or he was working. This happens a lot in a lot of the industries I'm in. They'll work with somebody for some time and then they'll ghost you. Yeah. And then they bought with somebody else, or they got their loan with somebody else. And that's a hard thing to swallow.
They didn't build enough gap from where the prospect was to where they want to be. And
it almost felt like that person was expendable, or just,
they view you as a commodity.
Correct.
Right. Just like a prospect might view a real estate agent as a commodity and trying to negotiate you on your fee. Yeah. It's the same concept. But here's what you have to analyze is like, okay, instead of blaming the market or the prospects, right? Like, oh, our prospects are always broke. Or, oh, the market's just bad. Woe is me. Because that's not going to help you, as you know. Why not look at ourselves as like, okay, what am I saying? What am I not asking? How am I using my tone that's causing these people that have problems that I can solve to run the other way?
Yeah.
And when you start analyzing that and you learn skills, now you're like, oh, it's me. So like, even though, with my success when I was a salesperson, in the trenches, if I lost a deal, like I never like blamed the prospect. I'm like, shit, what did I not do there? Like, what did I not see? What did I should have asked him this question when his tone sounded a little bit uncertain, and I lost a deal probably because of that. And I'd go back and like listen to recordings and anything. It was on the phone. And when I was in corporate America, selling B2B over the phone, everything's recorded. So I'd literally go back and hear the recordings. And I'm like, oh, that's where I was at. I triggered that cold call. But I was tired end of the day. My tone was flat, didn't sound familiar. Yeah. I triggered that reaction. I should have got that deal. Or, if it was, probably before Zoom, I did some when I was selling virtually for a company, I was on Skype and I'd have those recordings, or in person, so I'd always go back and analyze the recordings and stuff like that and see, where did I go wrong, and then you make tweaks. Yeah. And that's how you get much better when you figure that out.
That's huge. So what are the other tones? So you talked about 2 tones so far. Like, what are the other tones that you would kind of shift to during the conversation?
There's really 5 core tonalities that you have to really master if you want to be like a top 1% salesperson or even higher. Okay. The first one is the curious tone. So walk me through what type of house do you guys have now? Or walk me through, do you guys own the property you're now, or do you actually rent? Just a curious tone, right? It's curious. Instead of like, walk me through, John, do you guys own the house now, or do you rent? Robot, right? Sounds kind of weird, okay?
Yeah.
Now, with a curious tone's pretty easy to master. That's probably one of the easiest, okay? Now, there are subcategories of each of those tones. A familiar tone is a subcategory of a curious tone. It's not really one of the core 5, but it triggers curiosity, so it's a subcategory of the curious tone. The second biggest tonality you have to master is a confused tone. Yeah. Now, sometimes if you're one of our clients and you're in our virtual training courses and group training stuff, you understand what I mean by that, because we give examples and show them. But sometimes I'll do a reel about a confused tone, but like, you can't be confused. You got to show them the expert. And I'm like, I totally agree. I'm not saying you're in the presentation, you're like, oh, I don't know how it works. I don't know what we do for that. Like, I don't mean that. But just like that example where you're kind of confused. I think we talked, what was it, like 3 or 4, it might have been 4 months ago. You guys were looking at like the 5-bedroom house because you had like triplets that were born. Did you guys give up on finding the bigger house, or what actually happened? See, that's a confused tone. Yeah. That tone keeps them engaged. It keeps their brain curious, engaged, okay? Or let's say a prospect, they give you an emotional word. So you ask a question like, oh, this has just caused so much stress. You know what most salespeople say? Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Now let me ask you. And they'll just go to the next damn surface level question. I'm like, you just lost the sale right there. Because I always say this, what are the two biggest drivers, emotional drivers, that causes a human being to want to change? Pain and the fear of future pain. So if you can't help the prospect relive their pain of their current situation and past history and have a fear that that's going to continue, or if everything's perfect, that they could have future pain, that prospect feels no need to change. And when they feel no need to change, that's why they ghost you. That's why they don't show up. That's why they give you tons of objections. That's why they don't buy from you. Because at the core element of our being as human beings, we all have a deep fear of change. Even though they say we want to change, we have a fear of the unknown, and we are more than likely to stay with what we know, even if we don't like it that much, because it's more familiar to us, over something that is new or something that is unknown to us. Yeah. So it's your job as a sales professional, real estate, mortgages, any industry, to simply help your prospect overcome the fear of change. And when you do that, you're going to find you get way less objections. And if you do get an objection, it's really easy for you to help them overcome it, because you've already helped them overcome that fear of change.
So this is how you go from problem finder to product pusher to problem finder.
Yeah.
And you're trying to find out what problem they have. And
I'm trying to help them find out what their real problems are, because most prospects don't really know what their real problems are.
So they need to identify it first. So this is making the prospect, problem aware.
It's
first.
Getting them to self-actualize. It's like a psychologist. The highest paid psychologists in the world that charge like $1,000 an hour, they don't tell you what's wrong with you. They don't tell you what to do. That's what average psychologists do. The ones that make the most money ask you questions and shift their tone that allow you to tell yourself what you need to do.
So then you're just guiding them along.
You're like the facilitator.
Got it.
That's it.
So that's huge. Okay. So then when they've said it, now they
persuade themselves that they have the power to change their situation. And they view you as the person that got them there, when really all you just did is facilitated them realizing it themselves.
So this is why your approach is, is more different than others. It's almost like we're taking this role of psychologist a little bit with the individual.
But it's how you ask the questions. You can't just, like, a psychologist already has higher status, right? Because they got the degree on the wall. So like, it's like, I'll give you an example of this. So like you go to the doctor starts examining you, ask you a few questions, and 8 minutes later, like, okay, all right, let's go to the exam room to do the MRI. Just go ahead and take your clothes off here, and here's your nightgown. What do? You take your clothes off. You don't even question them. Like, yes, doctor, I will take my clothes off. Isn't that crazy?
That's wild.
You know why? It's because you view them in a higher status, okay? But if a salesperson said, okay, ask you a few questions, like, okay, you ready to buy? It's $25,000. You'd be like, what? I'm not buying. Why? Because the salesperson, you don't view them at a higher status. You view them at a lower status. So it's your job as a salesperson from the start of that conversation, whether it's in person, virtual, on the phone, it doesn't really matter, to come into that conversation within like split seconds where their brain starts to view you at least as the same status as they are. And throughout that conversation or conversations, keep raising your status in their mind, where by the end, they view you at a much higher status in that conversation, because they view you as the person who can solve the problems and get them the results they want. That's called situational status.
Yeah, that's huge. And so we got the confused tone, curious tone. What are the other ones?
Yeah, and let me go back to that confused tone. This is important. So let's say the prospect said, oh, this is causing so much stress. You can, stress? I can simply repeat back the word.
Yeah.
Okay, like you're confused. Hold on. How do you mean by stress? It's that confused tone, okay?
Yeah.
Now, what triggers in their subconscious brain immediately is like, oh, he didn't understand what I meant by stress. I need to what? Explain that better. Oh gosh, you have no idea that's been going on just last week. And now just by me using a confused tone, hold on, how do you mean by stress? It's kind of that confused, concerned tone. Their brain says, he didn't understand what I meant. Nobody's going to be like, well, you idiot, you should know what I mean by stress. Nobody will ever do that, right? If I use that tone. But that tone triggers their brain to say, he didn't understand what I meant. I need to expand on that. And when they expand on that, they start to emotionally open up and relive their pain. That's an example of getting them to relive the pain. That moves them to change. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now, next tone is the challenging tone.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, challenging tone is not something you're going to use at the first part of a conversation, because you don't have much trust or credibility yet. You can't challenge somebody at the beginning. But let's say if I'm 3/4 of the way into the conversation and I've built trust, I built a much bigger gap. They start to recognize that they've got many more issues and problems than they originally thought they had. They now view me as more of an expert, somebody they can trust. So you're okay if your mom challenges you on something because you trust your mom. But you don't trust a salesperson the first few minutes. But if I do a good enough job building a gap, helping them relive the pain, they're emotionally bonded with you as the human being, okay? And so I can lean in and say, well, I mean, you certainly sound motivated, but what happens if you don't do anything about this? You just stay in the house you are now, and you keep having the gang violence that's been going on the last couple of years here.
Yeah.
I can use that challenging tone. I mean, what could possibly happen to your family at that point? And then I lower my tone at the very end into that kind of soft, concerned tone. That's just an example of a challenging tone.
Yeah.
What happens if you don't do anything about this? See, but I can't say that at the very beginning. 3/4 of the way, and after I build trust, I can challenge them on that. And they'll be like, oh gosh, no, I have to do something, because they respect you by that point. Okay.
Yeah.
If you don't know that skill, don't try that, folks, at home. If you don't know how to build gap or get them to let their guard down, because if you just try to do a challenging tone and they've been surface level with you the whole time, that could backfire on you. So you have to learn everything before that. And then there's subcategory that would be like a skeptical tone. Oh, so they were making you pay that much of an interest rate? It's kind of a skeptical tone.
Yeah.
Like I'm seeding doubt that maybe another mortgage company, they were forcing you to pay that? Notice the words forcing, making.
Yeah.
See, negative words, right? Oh, they were having you pay that. See, that doesn't sound that negative. Oh, they're having you pay that interest rate? Doesn't sound anything. Oh, so they were going to force you to pay that high of a rate? See how I'm seeding doubt by that skeptical tone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it also like, it doesn't necessarily talk bad about the competition.
Yeah.
But you're just seeding out like, hey, maybe I wasn't being treated. Maybe I was being ripped off.
I'm
all these
seeding
things.
doubt in their mind that the company they're already talking to maybe not be that good. Because if I'm like, oh, that's a horrible rate, that's a bad company, they're gonna be like, well, of course, you're biased, you're a salesperson. But if I'm like, oh, they're gonna make you pay that?
Yeah.
Like you know something that they don't know about it. But you're not saying anything bad about the company, so they don't get defensive. It's
That's
more
huge.
trust. You see what I'm doing there? There's a lot more to that, but yeah.
And then it's also just about being really intentional with your words.
Yeah.
And so it looks like this is, a lot of people will say, well, Neil, I'm trying these things and I'm not getting the result. It's like what you said, you haven't looked back at how did you really sound when you said them. It's not about the words, it's how you said the words.
It's how you said, it's really how. It's not, because let's say that you're a salesperson, you're in a company, you all use the same script. Why is one salesperson outselling everybody else 3-1? It's because of how they're asking the questions.
And also they go off script.
Yeah, and they go off script.
Yeah.
See, scripts are actually really good. I suggest scripts, but I suggest that you understand the framework of that sales structure and not obviously read it, because you sound like a scripted robot. Like, you watch any movie, Tom Cruise, everything he says in Mission Impossible is 100% scripted.
Yeah.
Does it sound scripted?
Not at all.
No, it sounds real. It sounds natural, right? Because he's memorized his lines and he knows how to shift. So with a salesperson, you might have a script, but based on if I ask a question and that prospect gives me an answer that doesn't really set up my next question, I have to know instantly within a split second how to tweak that next question I was going to ask to something a little bit different.
Yeah.
That makes the prospect feel like I understand them. I understand their unique situation, right? Because I'm including the data that they are telling me about their problems and issues into the next questions.
Yeah.
If I don't, and I just ask the next question on the script, it sounds surface level and the prospect feels like you're just asking sales questions.
Yeah, but you can tell. It almost feels like you're on a track, you know, and just moving along the track. Okay.
Yeah, it's like an FBI interrogator. So that you freeze up. You either like, hey, just get to the point, tell me what it is, or take interested, or can you just tell me it's going to cost, or enough of the questions, like I know what you're trying to do, can you tell me the cost? Or they'll be like, they'll just go with it. But every question you ask, they'll just give you vague, generalized, surface level, short answers. And do human beings buy on logic or emotion? Emotion. They don't 100%. Buy on logic, right?
Yeah.
And then you have the, sticking with the tones, you have the concern tone, the tone that shows empathy. This is probably one of the hardest tones for a salesperson to master, especially if you're a man, because men don't really, the DNA wasn't built with empathy like a woman would be. For women, this is easier because it's already wired in their DNA. They're nurturing. They always show empathy, right? Yeah. But for men, that's the hard one, okay? So let's say if a prospect has, let's say you're a real estate agent and you've been trying to get this prospect to come see this one house and they keep, like pushing it down the road. You keep calling. They're like, yeah, let's do it next week. Then they don't answer. And then, you know what I'm saying? Like you keep chasing them. The next time you get back on the phone, hey, John, we've been trying to actually schedule this property tour for the last 3 or 4 weeks, and it just hasn't seemed to work out. Like, what's, this is off the record. What's really holding you back from wanting to go see it?
Yeah.
See how that tone shifted down to that concern tone? Prospects aren't going to waffle with you at that point. But if I'm like, yeah, we've been trying to do this for several weeks. Like, what's really holding you back from seeing it? They're like, oh, I've just been too busy.
Yeah.
So
You get a surface level question.
Surface level question, surface level answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when salespeople say, oh, my prospects just don't open up to me, I'm like, well, it's because the questions you're asking are surface level. You're forcing them to be surface level by what you're asking.
So how does someone get really good at this? Is it role play? Is it
you
obviously
have to be trained
reps on
by
the
somebody
phone?
who knows what to do, right?
Yeah.
I love salespeople. They're like, because in our client training course, we train them because you're trained by me. You're trained by our sales trainers that I have trained that crushed it in their industries that now train salespeople as well. But they know what to do. It's perfect practice made perfect. Isn't that like Alex Hormozy said, or Michael Jordan? I don't know, somebody said it right.
Yeah.
Michael Jordan said it best. You can shoot 1,000 jump shots a day, but if your technique is off, if you were taught the wrong technique by the wrong person, you're still going to suck at basketball. Yeah. So like, who are you going to practice tonality with? The salesperson that hasn't mastered it themselves? Who are you going to practice tonality with? Your spouse, who's not even in sales?
Yeah.
Who are you going to practice with? You probably want to be practiced with by somebody like, Tiger Woods probably practices with somebody that's pretty dang good at golf.
Yeah.
He probably wouldn't do that good if he practiced with somebody that's not that good at golf.
Yeah, it's like other salespeople, the community of people, programs, and like I think this is the way people get just the reps to get better at this.
Yeah, I mean, I learned tonality and body language and facial expressions by an acting instructor. He was really, really talented.
So then we got concerns. So what's the last one?
And then you have the playful tone.
Okay.
So the playful tone is really important to open up your prospects. It works on any personality, especially A-type personalities. Okay. So let's say that let's say that you're a real estate agent and you're coming over you cold called, you successfully set up an appointment to come by and look at a house to maybe get the listing. I'm just throwing it out there. Okay. You come to the door, you knock on the door, the prospect comes out and says, hey, how's it going? What would most real estate agents say? Give me an example.
Yeah. If you said it as the prospect.
Yeah. The prospect, let's say that the real estate agent knocks on the door and the prospect says it first. How you doing today? Come on in.
Doing great.
Doing great. Now that doesn't hurt you.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really help you. So everything is all about pattern interrupting. It's all about getting the prospects to let their guard down. We call that disarming. Always be disarming. Yeah. So what I want to do is I'd use a playful tone. Say, just let me take a drink of water so I can get the tone right here. That's why I like the hot water when you're speaking, opens up your vocal cords. That's another tip for you guys at home. If you want to speak better, especially if you speak on stage or podcast and everything, you need to drink like really hot water, not where it's scalding you, because that would hurt, but like just under that. I'm not talking lukewarm because your vocal cords will open up. It's easier. So knock on the door. Hey, how you doing today? Come on in the house. Oh, just hanging out, being the boring guy. What about you? What are you guys doing? Just that little thing. Oh gosh, I'm sure you're not boring, Jeremy.
Yeah.
See what I'm doing there? I'm almost like putting myself down a little bit, not in a negative term, but in like a playful term, and that causes the prospect to come to my rescue. Do you see what I'm saying? Oh, just hanging out, trying to stay out of trouble. What about you guys? You getting in trouble today? Oh, no, we've been good. See, just that little thing right there is a disarming technique, because what happens in their brain is it releases dopamine when they laugh. Yeah. And that's a disarming technique. So it gets them to let their guard down and open up. I'm not doing it to be funny or to be a comedian. In fact, I'm not funny at all. If you know me, I'm like the most serious person on the planet. Like I have no personality sometimes, but I'm using it to disarm that prospect to get them to let their guard down. Okay.
Yeah.
Or like, let's say, somebody calls in, as you're a lender, right? You're a mortgage agent. Somebody calls in like, we're looking for, a loan for the house or whatever. Well, you know what? I love that. I have never had somebody call me that did not want to get lending for a house. So I think you're in a good spot. Yeah. Yeah. Just little stuff like that. Like, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Just a little gets them to open up. Just a playful tone.
So this could be any one of these can be the pattern interrupt.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. And
depending on the situation.
And here's the thing, you're always pattern interrupting the whole conversation.
Yeah.
That's what you understand. Like when I say always be disarming, ABDs of silent, always be disarming. Always means always. from the start of that conversation to the middle, to 3/4 to the end. If you're in B2B sales and you're talking to your sales cycles longer, whatever, everything you're doing is all about disarming. The emails you're sending, disarming. The text messages you're sending, disarming. You're always getting them to keep their guard down, because the moment the guard comes up, what happens?
Yeah, it just goes south. Or they give you these basic answers that don't mean anything, and then you get ghosted.
They have uncertainty.
Yeah.
Yeah, uncertainty. When your prospect's guard goes up, they have uncertainty in their brain. Uncertainty leads to objections. I want them to have 100% certainty, because if they have 100% certainty, I usually can eliminate most objections in their mind before they happen. If that makes sense. That's called objection prevention. That doesn't mean you're never going to get an objection, but if you can learn, objection prevention techniques like disarming and stuff, and you're reducing, let's say, 50 to 60% of the objections you get now, by default, you're just going to make more sales. I always love it when in the past, I don't know if sales trainers say it anymore, but I heard a few sales trainers maybe 5 years ago when I started, they'd be like, oh, the more objections you get, that means they're more interested. I'm like, how does that make any sense? The more objections they give you, the more they're interested. Well, what about the laydowns that had 0 objections? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
The more objections you get, the less likely they are to buy, because you've triggered uncertainty in their brain. And uncertainty leads to more objections. That is not a good thing. You want to try to prevent those. And if you learn disarming techniques and you learn how to build a gap from where they are to where they want to be, they start to view you as the expert, the authority that can get them there. So they do have a concern. It's really so much easier for you to help them overcome it, because they already trust you.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
Feel like you're trying to sell them something.
Yeah, this is huge. And I think of it just goes back to the point of like, hey, it's not adversarial anymore. You're just more of their counselor. You're going to help them get to the other end of whatever it is they're trying to do.
Yeah, 100%. It's all about disarming.
And so this is the thing I want to shift to wrap up, is also in the B2B side. I know you help a lot of people B2B, and in your agency or in your training company, you guys are training people within the industries. Yeah,
B2C, B2B. We're the revenue-wise, supposedly our rankings is just an outside agency that ranks sales training companies, not my grandma.
Yeah.
But we're the largest business to consumer sales training company in the world now. And overall, between B2C and B2B, we're the 4th largest overall in the world.
Okay.
As far as revenue, annual revenues.
Love that. And I know a lot of the training that we see online comes from people that are related to or start off in the automotive industry. You see a lot of this stuff. Like, what do you think of the advice that's out there today from guys like, say, Andy Elliott or the like?
I don't know Andy. Andy's, they have their headquarters in Scottsdale as well. I don't know exactly where, but I'm sure Andy's great. I just don't know. I would never judge a book by its cover. Until I met Andy and really understood his methodology, I wouldn't really know what to say.
I know you review other people's stuff on your social and kind of like,
I
don't know if you ever done his stuff, but he has a lot of advice about the same things of like how to disarm people, but it's more related to, I guess, the automotive industry.
This is an industry we train for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe our disarming techniques are different. I don't know, but I'm, a couple of my guys showed a couple motivational videos from him, seemed pretty legit on the motivational. I just don't know what his sales methodology is. I don't know. Everybody's like, you guys got to meet, go to dinner. So maybe we'll do. Andy, reach out to us. We'll go out to dinner and talk methodologies.
There's a collaboration there.
I'll have him on my podcast or something.
For sure. So this is the thing I'd love to do is just, if we're looking at a specific example, I'd love to hear your feedback on this. So let's just say, I'm speaking at an event, for example, for the people in the industry.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people in this industry, they don't have a personal brand. They don't do digital marketing. They're more old school.
Okay.
Nothing wrong with that. It's just a relationship business.
Yeah.
And so we help them kind of modernize their marketing.
Yeah. Good.
And so we go through a presentation of showing them the different things that they can do to do this.
Yeah.
And the opportunity there, and showing real examples of either myself or people in our programs that have done this.
Yeah.
And at the end, we'll offer people an opportunity to join our program.
Sure.
Now, some people will join right away, which is awesome. And they start to take action. I feel like the people who have compressed time between the time they hear an idea when they actually try it, those are the people like most likely to succeed in the group.
Yeah.
But then we have a lot of people who reach out and they will, but then they don't do anything.
And they don't get into the training programs?
Correct. They don't get in. And so I know you deal with this a lot as well. like, what is the strategy for following up with these people who they expressed interest. They saw the presentation. They raised their hand that they want more information, and then they literally just fall off the face.
You know why they don't act on it though? Because they're human. They're afraid of change.
Yeah, it's a new marketing.
They want what you have. That's why they raised their hand and said help. Otherwise, they would have never responded. So obviously, they know they have some type of problem. They might not realize how bad that problem really is, or what the consequences are if they don't do anything about solving that problem.
Yeah.
So somewhere in your presentation, you've got to be able to use, because when you're selling one-to-many, it's different techniques, not necessarily different techniques, but different ways you frame things compared to if you're selling one-to-one, or if I'm selling if I'm in a boardroom in B2B selling 1 to 8, is I have to use different frames if I'm selling 1 to 10,000 or 1 to 1,000, because you can't help them overcome their concerns one by one, right? That's not possible. So you have to be able to tell different frames and stories to be able to help them overcome that concern in the presentation, to get them to feel like it is, let's say, far less risky for them to purchase your training and get what they want, to get the funding for that, than it is for them to do nothing at all and stay in the status quo and the problems stay the same. In reality, which is more risky. So it's like how you're framing it that's causing them to want to do it, but then come up with an excuse like, I can't go into debt, or, now's not the right time, or I can't afford it.
Or I'll do it later. That's
or I'll do it later down the road. So you've got to be able to see stuff. So when we have live events, we will bring clients in to actually speak, and we'll do panels, and we'll cover the main objections that we know salespeople would have. Like, well, I just need to put in more reps. I'm young in sales. If I just put in the years and the reps, eventually I'll learn how to do it. How crazy is that? So I have to have, a client there that used to believe in that lie as well, that myth. And they'll talk about, when I first was looking at the training, I believed in this lie that if I, since I was 22, that, if I just worked hard, like some of the vets in the company that were 20 years older than me, that, and did more reps, that eventually I would figure out how to do this. But after I started doing it for 2, 3, 4 years, I started realizing that literally, if I don't learn the skills, it's going to be the same for me 20 years later.
Yeah.
And so it's getting, what would be good for you is to get clients to kind of answer those big lies that your audience has, or those myths that they believe that really hold them back from having the results they want. Because in our market, it's not like salespeople don't come to us that don't want to learn how to sell more. Yeah. It's not like that companies come to us that don't want to learn how to sell more. They all want that. But if we don't frame it the right way and help them overcome those little things in their mind that hold them back, where they have that fear of change, they're not going to move forward no matter how much logic you prove. We could show them, we have a little bit under 24,000 testimonials from clients, big testimonials. Not like, oh, Jeremy's hair is cool today, but oh my gosh, I've learned how to do this. I've learned how to do this. My closing, I tripled my closing percentages last month, or I went from this amount of income to that amount of income. Can't use those because they're not compliant anymore. As you know, with FTC, you have to cross out the income testimonials even from clients, which is crazy. That's another story. But you could prove it to them all day long. That doesn't mean that they're going to feel like, well, that person's different. Well, that person's different. Well, that person's different, right?
Yeah.
And so you got to be able to help them overcome that throughout the body of the presentation.
So these people are just in the mode of disqualifying themselves.
What do you mean?
So they're watching this. They see somebody else who had success. Easy for him to say, it's not going to be me.
Yeah.
Or
that's where you have a person then you have a person on there then you'd be like, if that's a concern that the audience had, you have someone who's like, you know what, I was in an audience once, and I'm like, well, of course that guy can do it, or of course she can do it. She's really pretty, or I believed in this lie that I had to be really good looking to be really good as a real estate agent, right? But, and so that identifies with that audience member that's like, yeah, I believe that too. And so I believe that I was going to have to work way more hours because I wasn't as good looking as all these other real estate agents. I didn't have the pretty blonde hair or the brunette hair or red hair or whatever. I didn't wear the nice dresses or whatever. And I believed in the slide that I was going to overwork myself and blah, 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 blah. But then what I found was, and see, that client just helped you overcome those little hidden things that holds that prospect back from ever accomplishing what she wants to do in a real estate career or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's
things
huge.
Like that.
I think
it's just how you frame it.
Yeah, I think it's also a lot of people are burnt out and, afraid of trying something new, or they've been sold in the past and didn't work out. So I think one of the things that has helped a lot is also showing them that there's a better way, to doing business. So when you're introducing a new idea where they don't know that this is the solution. So for example, a lot of the audience would be burnt out. They've been doing this on an average multiple decades. You talk to a guy, it used to be they would tell you how long they've been in the industry by years. Now they tell you by decades. Because it's like the average age of the people in the industry is in the late 40s.
Okay.
So I've been doing this 10 years, 20 years. Okay. Are you burnt out? How many people feel burnt out? Almost all the hands go up.
Yeah.
So, the biggest lie I was told was that if you work harder, you'll make more.
Yeah. If you just stay in longer, get more reps, you're going to eventually get a pool of business, and you're just going to have clients coming to you.
And the truth is, for those who are been commoditized, you kind of just it's the same year on repeat. You got 20 years, but it was year one.
Yeah.
So selling them this opportunity, I guess, of not necessarily the product, but more about the outcome. You say that this is the biggest mistake people make as well, as
because
you're selling the actual program.
You're trying to sell your thing,
which is videos and personal brand.
Yeah, they don't buy your thing. They buy the results of what your thing does for them, right? So if you're a branding agency, they don't buy like, oh, I'm going to buy this branding program. No, they buy the results of what the branding program does for them, which helps them build a brand where they get more listings and they can make more sales, right? If you're on the real estate side, same thing on the mortgage side.
So is that like showing them, okay, because I did this, here's how my life is now. It's a lot about, it's less hours because we attract more business.
I believed in the lie that I had to do this, this, and this. And what I found was it had nothing to do with the hours I was working. It had everything to do with the skill sets and how my brand appeared to my market. And because I didn't have a brand, people perceived me as like lower status in the market compared to all the other agents that were more branded. And so once I changed my brand, everything changed, and now I work half the hours. I mean, there'll be more to that.
Of course, yeah.
But that's how you're framing it. It'd be a better frame than I'm just giving you kind of the short version.
Yeah, but that makes sense because now you're selling the vacation, I guess is what they call it. Like, here's the opportunity of where you could be if you did this.
You're selling their future state.
And that
their objective state. I call it their objective state. Some trainers call it their future state. I call it their objective state.
And so then earlier what you said is the risk of inaction becomes you're stuck here.
Yeah. Which is more risky? Is it more risky to get the funding together? You get your brand set up, and now instead of getting 2 listings a month, you're getting 8. Or is it more risky doing nothing at all, staying in the status quo, and you just stay at 2 listings a month? I mean, in reality, which is more expensive?
Yeah.
But you have to say that in a different tone. Like that tone I just did right there is just me talking.
Yes.
I wouldn't use that on a prospect. I'd be like, well, in reality, I mean, Josiah, like which is more risky for you? I mean, is it more risky for you to, get the funding together? We train you the branding, and you go from 2 listings a month to 8, or is it more risky for you to, do nothing at all and, stay in the status quo at 2 listings a month and, nothing ever changes? I mean, reality, which is more risky for you? See, the tone has to be the right, because if I said it in the first type of tone, they might be like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Because it's like they feel like you're using it as a sales tactic. But with that tone, when I have that concerned tone and I verbal pace it out, right? That's a whole nother story we could talk about. You got to learn verbal pacing. The prospect feels like I generally am concerned about the consequence if they don't do this. And I am. Yeah. See, I always had this belief that sales is not something you do to people. Sales is something you do for people. Like if there's no sale, if nobody bought anything from a salesperson, there'd be no such thing as an economy. If there's no such thing as an economy, that means we don't have a society. Sales has always been here. Like that's what an economy causes there to be such thing as a society. Even, back in the days, whenever that was, where they're out, hunting and gathering or whatever, they were still trading stuff. They were still selling each other stuff. Like, oh, here's some furs. I'm going to give you a spear. Like that's selling, right? Yeah. So it's always been here. It's just, do you want to stay in the status quo and sell the same way you always have, get the same results, or do you want to learn a higher level of sales ability where you help more people?
Yeah. And so do you believe that as we go on in the future, that salespeople, because right now it seems like salespeople make they're highly rewarded, right? Compared to other people in the company.
If you have the right skills.
If you're doing it right.
Yeah.
And so the top salespeople have this great earnings potential, and they're kind of sought after. They almost become like, a lot of people in ops will complain like, hey, the sales guys get treated so much better than us because they're bringing in so much revenue.
Well, it's like somebody saying like, well, why does LeBron James get paid more than the team manager? That's not fair. Well, LeBron James is bringing in the revenue. So the people who are bringing the revenue typically will get paid the most because it's a skill set that most people don't have, right? So LeBron James, like, Michael Jordan, like Steph Curry, like why do they get paid tens of millions of dollars a year? Well, because they have a skill set that 99.999% of the world does not have. And that's why they should get paid the most. If you're clerk at the grocery store, nothing against that. I think those are good starter jobs, but that is a skill set that a lot of other people can learn very quickly. And so your employer doesn't feel like they have a lot of other options.
Yeah.
They only have one LeBron James. They only have one Steph Curry. They only have this one person that can do this. So as a salesperson, if you're, like the companies I sold for, they're, one company I was driving in 40% of their total revenue for the entire company. And it was a huge company, doing about 350 million a year. So like, what are they going to do with me?
Yeah.
When I'm bringing in,
they're going to take care of you. Yeah.
When I'm bringing in like almost half of their revenue, they're going to take care of me. So even if that company like starts going out of business, guess who's going to be the last one out the door?
Yeah.
Me, and if you are, because you have knowledge, right, that most people don't have as a salesperson, if you learn that knowledge and you know how to apply it, you're going to have 100 other companies trying to recruit you every 10 seconds, which is a good position to be in.
Yeah. And I think of like, you even talked about this on a podcast once. You said, hey, there was a company that tried to put you on a salary plus, then you're like, no, let me just take all.
Like, no. I just like, you don't need, like in B2B, they'll put you on like a salary and then, commissions, whatever. And I'm like, just no salary. And just like, instead of this percentage per sale, just pay me this. And they're like, okay,
Yeah, it works out better for you. But I think this is the thing, if everybody's, watching, listening to this, is, hey, this skill set, just what you learned today in this episode, and what hopefully you dive deeper on this, can be the missing link in terms of you taking your income to the next level. I see so many people trying to start their business and learn the latest marketing hacks and this and that. If you are good at this, I'm telling you right now, just even as a mid-sized business owner, this is highly sought after. Like to this day, people, like, we're looking for people all the time. And I know of so many other companies that are looking for the same type of person.
Yeah.
And so I think that is the key for someone who wants to level up in terms of income, is to get good at this.
Salespeople always, that number one question I get asked at any live event, or even a virtual event or anything, how do I gain more confidence as a salesperson, Jeremy? And I'm shocked when somebody asks me that, because I'm just like, well, you want to gain more confidence, you just got to gain more skill level, because your confidence level will depend on your skill level, because your skill level either makes you more sales or unfortunately makes you far less sales. So how can you have high confidence as a salesperson with a low skill level? It doesn't make any sense. How can you literally have a high confidence level as a real estate agent, as a mortgage broker? How do you have high confidence if your skill level's down here? You can get pumped up every single day by motivational, videos or whatever. But at the end of the day, if your skill level is here, that means you're not selling that much, and your confidence level will always go back down to where your skill level is. So when you increase your skill level as a salesperson, much better questions than you know how to ask now. How to verbal pace the questions out. I'll give you an example. I was watching a YouTube video the other day, and it talked about, what was his name? Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
And his speeches, and it was analyzing his speeches and Winston Churchill's speeches. And they purposely, even in their speeches, would put little dots where they wanted to verbal pause and pace, like I just did right there, and pace out the question, because it triggers the audience to stay engaged. It forces the brain to stay engaged. It cannot wonder. But if you just talk the whole time, so imagine Martin Luther King, I have a dream that one day mankind will be equal, not on their color of their skin, but whatever he says after that. But imagine if he said, I have a dream one day that mankind will be equal by not by the color of their skills, but by their character, in one ear out the other. You didn't even hear that, you know? But because he verbal paused in between those sayings, it forced your brain to stay engaged, and it forced your brain to hone in on different words he wanted you to hear.
Yeah, it's
That's
huge.
verbal pacing.
And so this is the skill level that I think comes with training and all these things, and then it puts you in the
learn that on free YouTube videos.
Yeah, it puts you, but it puts you in the top category, and that's when your income can really rise. So I think this is the
skill level. Your amount of skill level will always determine your amount of income level.
Yeah, and the reason why I kind of bring it back to financial freedom is because when I looked into YouTube, for example, we look at our channel, we look at how many people, what are our viewers watching?
Yeah.
The top, in the top 3 things, it was how to make more money.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, that's definitely a human need. Money doesn't give you happiness, but it does give you more options in life to help more people. Donate more to your church, donate to your charities. So your uncle has some type of rare cancer that's not treated by the insurance. You can help him out.
Yeah.
Like if you don't have money, you can't do this type of thing. It gives you more options.
Yeah.
Skill level gives you more options in life.
And so what's the best way, I guess, for people to stay in contact with you? Just follow you on IG or?
Yeah, they can follow me on Instagram at Jeremy Lee Minor. It's my verified account. There's 700 some thousand on that account. And they go to barnesandnoble.com. They can get our Barnes & Noble bestseller, Wall Street Journal bestseller called I don't have one with me, I didn't bring one, but The New Model of Selling. It's an orange book, New Model of Selling to an Unsellable Generation, co-authored by Jerry Acuff as well, a good friend of mine that runs a consulting firm on the East Coast. But it's a tactical book where they'll learn some skills. Now, are you going to master sales from reading a book? Hate to tell you this, no, because books are just words. You can't learn tonality or how to ask or say those words in a book, even an audio book, because the way they make the author read it, you can't train that. So if you get into IG, you follow me, you want to like learn, hey, like I want to look at some training programs so I can learn how to sell more, just message me on there and somebody on my team will message you back. Every once in a while, and boom, I might even message you back. I'd like do that every once in a while. I'll get bored, I'll just message somebody back. And they can look at our different training programs for their industry to give them the skills to raise your confidence, sell more.
And make
a lot more people. Hey, you make more money, but more importantly, you help way more prospects solve their problems and get what they want. And that's why you should have gotten sales in the first place.
Yes, sir. So that's the key. Thank you so much for doing this, man. I appreciate you.
It was great to be on your show, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.